is from the second letter to Timothy, chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. Please feel free to read along by turning to page 213 in the New Testament portion of your two Bibles. As for me, I am already being poured out as a libation, and the time of my departure has come. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. From now on, there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me on that day, and not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. May the Spirit of wisdom guide our understanding of this scripture.
Thanks be to God.
Author, blogger, and public speaker John Green has recently been described as a teenage whisperer for 21st century young people coming of age. You will find Green's books on the young adult shelves of libraries and bookstores. He is also the host of a very entertaining YouTube video series called Crash Course History, where you can learn lots of fun stuff. And not too long ago, he and his brother started a podcast, Dear Hank and John, which again, is very fun. John Green, if you know and love a teenager or a young adult, or if you know and love someone who does know and love a teenager, John Green needs to be on your radar screen. One of the things that makes Mr. Green so compelling, I think, is that he himself lives with a diagnosis of mental illness. Green lives with severe anxiety and obsessive-compulsive disorder. He has had to learn how to manage his symptoms over time. He has had to take breaks from public life to manage those symptoms. He has to remember, like everyone, to take his medications. He lives with a chronic illness, which means that, among other things, John Green gets it when it comes to the fragility and the wisdom of those among us who are coming of age in these difficult times. Green's breakthrough into a larger audience came about 5 years ago when a movie adapted from his second novel entitled The Fault in Our Stars came out. It was a story about two teenagers, both of whom were living with cancer, who befriend each other and fall in love with each other and help each other through the valley of the shadow of death, if you will. The book was good, the movie was really good, and between the two they made household names of the two major characters, Hazel and Gus. Green's most recent novel is called Turtles Diving Down, and it deals in the first person with a teenage character who shares Green's own diagnosis and who is doing her best to navigate the landscape of her life. And his first novel, which is called Looking for Alaska, is now an 8-part mini-series on Hulu, for those of you all who stream TV, starring some wonderful young actors, great performances, also featuring, by the way, Drew Powell as a not-so-young actor anymore, my nephew, and dealing with the very difficult issue of teenage depression and how communities make each other stronger in the midst of that. Again, if you know or if you are a young adult, this is a story I think you need to hear. One of the reasons Green is on my mind this week is because he's such a good resource for parents in general. But another reason I've been thinking about him is because the main character in his book, Looking for Alaska, is a young man who has all kinds of quirks and insecurities. So many people of that age do, but one of his quirks is that he has an obsession with the last words of famous people. This character came to mind today because in a way, today Bob gave us an opportunity to listen again to what had become pretty famous last words from the Apostle Paul. I'm not sure he wrote them as such, but that's what they become. I have already been poured out as a libation, and the time for my departure has come. I have fought the good fight, I have finished the race, I have kept the faith. From now on there is reserved for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will give me one day, and not only me, but also those who have longed for God's appearing. Impressive last words, don't you think? We hear them a lot. These words we heard on Friday morning, those of you all who were able to listen to the memorial service for Elijah Cummings. These were some of the words he chose to share at that service. I included words like these in the prayer just yesterday at the memorial service for Aunt Marge. I fought the good fight and I finished the race. Of course, we don't know that these were actually the last thing Paul said. They probably were not his very last words. He may have been surprised to know that they've become so popular. You all may remember from last week that Paul wrote these words when he was sitting in a Roman jail cell. And we have reason to believe that he really thought that he was going to get out of that jail and be reunited with his people. But in the midst of that solitary loneliness, he wrote these wonderful words. And they have withstood the test of time and are now shared by so many, so often. Almost always among the last things we say about the people we've loved and lost. She has fought the good fight. He has finished the race. They bring us comfort. Last words. Sometimes they are poetic. Other times not so much. President Kennedy's last words in Dallas were not poetic for obvious reasons, but they were saturated with meaning. Jackie told us later that when she turned around and said to the president, "You can't say that Dallas doesn't love you," the last thing Kennedy said was, "No, you certainly can't." Others had more of an awareness of their words being their last words. Vincent van Gogh, who is said to have suffered from his own mental illness, schizophrenia probably, before there was much of a diagnosis and any real cure, he grew despondent over his constant headaches and his hallucinations. While he was alone one week, living just outside of Paris, Van Gogh decided he couldn't stand the hallucinations any longer, took a revolver into the field behind his house and used it. But when he thought that the wound that he inflicted upon himself wasn't going to be mortal, he staggered back to his home and told his friend, "I missed myself." And then early the next morning, just before he passed away, Van Gogh whispered, "There is no end to sorrow." Alexander Hamilton must have been prepared at some level for the possibility that he wasn't going to survive his duel with Aaron Burr. When Burr's bullet caused him to fall, witnesses say Hamilton said to the doctor on the scene, "This is a mortal wound, doctor." And then later, the next day, before he passed away, Hamilton said to his dear wife, "Remember, Eliza, you are a Christian." John Wilkes Booth's last words were useless, as he died on the porch outside the Virginia barn where he had been hiding. It's true, the circumstances have aligned themselves in such a way that some among us have delivered memorable, famous last words, but most of the time it doesn't work out that way, right? Most of the time, the words by which we are remembered aren't really our last words, but the other words we speak. The words we say when we're just being ourselves. These words from Paul were uttered under desperate circumstances, and sometimes those kinds of circumstances bring out the best in us. Think of Francis Scott Key sitting in his prison inside the boat floating just outside the city of Baltimore. Certainly he rose to the occasion with the words to the Star-Spangled Banner. Some believe that Mozart wrote his great Requiem Mass for himself because he was so sick, and he died before it was completed. Bobby Kennedy was in Indianapolis when he got the word that Martin Luther King had been killed. People there in Indianapolis still say that the words, which were also among his last public words, were largely responsible for keeping riots from breaking out in the streets of Indianapolis like they did in so many other places. We do often rise to the occasion and utter our best words under difficult circumstances, and they're remembered. But for just about all of us, the words that we're going to be remembered by, the words that will live long after we are gone and help people tell our stories, are the words that we say during all the ordinary normals of our lives. What will the words be that people remember you by? Elijah Cummings said some eloquent things about angels dancing and about the minute that we have to live while he was a member of the House of Representatives. But the people who worked closest to him, his staff, report that what they'll remember most about him is how, after a big event, almost always he would take them aside before they all went home and say, "I just want to thank you for all you do and for being part of my destiny." Those are some pretty good last words. Has it ever happened to you that someone will come up to you and thank you for something you once said to them? I'll never forget those words, they might say, and for the life of you, you can't remember what it was you said. Famous last words are more likely to be the words we just tend to say as a matter of course. Those are the words that will kind of bubble up as people remember who we are. Which means, of course, that we are wise to always mind our words. Even if they don't end up in the Bible, we can be pretty sure they'll be remembered. And on those occasions, on those rare occasions, when we have spoken sharply to someone we dearly love, we are wise to find them as quickly as possible and give them new words by which to remember us while we have our opportunity. Benjamin Zander is an orchestral conductor full-time, but he's a motivational speaker part-time, and he has a wonderful series of TED Talks designed to introduce people to the world of classical music, people who don't know anything about classical music, and help them to love it. And he likes to close all those talks with almost a word of benediction, a last word, if you will, that reminds his audience that it matters what we say. And he does this by telling a story. It's a story that was first told to him by a woman who survived Auschwitz, one of the rare survivors. She went to Auschwitz when she was 15 years old, and her little brother was 8, and her parents were already lost. They were on the train, the two of them, almost to their destination, having no idea where they were going, having been roused from wherever they were, not really knowing what to expect, when the 15-year-old sister looked down at her 8-year-old brother and saw that her brother's shoes were missing. He'd forgotten his shoes in the rush of leaving. And she said to him, "You're so stupid," she said. "Why can't you keep your things together, for heaven's sake?" And she said it in a way that older sisters might speak to a younger sibling. We know that tone of voice. Unfortunately, it ended up being the last thing this 15-year-old girl ever got to say to her little brother. The train came to a stop. The two were separated on the platform. Boys over here, girls over here. They were in different parts of the camp and never saw each other. He did not survive. And so when she came out of Auschwitz and found out he was gone, she made a vow. She walked out of Auschwitz into new life and made this vow. The vow was, "I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say." I will never say anything that couldn't stand as the last thing I ever say. Now, if we're realistic, we can't do that all the time, right? We would make ourselves crazy to try it. But as Andrew says, it's a possibility to live into. Never say anything you can't stand is the thing. The last thing we ever say. Not a bad charge for us to help remind us that one way or another, we will be remembered by our words.